Local history, local culture, local events, your community. This is the Joe Kelly Show.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Chris Sagaas is our guest. Chris is the director of the Utica Public Library, and the Utica Public Library is what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to start, as Julie Andrews said in The Sound of Music, the best place to start is at the very beginning, and that's where we're going to start. What happened to the library during COVID, Chris?
Well, unfortunately, like so many other businesses, we experienced a decrease in revenue, had to furlough staff, shut our doors to the public. We shut down for about a month where we were trying to reorient, figure out what we were going to do. And then what we started to do was develop our online programming, virtual. We all met virtually as a staff. We still had the staff who was working occupied and trying to figure out how we were going to move forward. And then in May, we actually were able to have staff back in the building. And although we've been closed in the sense that we are not open every hour we used to be open and people could not enter freely, we developed curbside pickup. We were answering the phones, doing online email reference questions. Essentially, we were a smaller staff with limited services during most of the last 16 months or so.
And now you're open?
Yep, last week we were able to open. We have limited hours. We were able to bring some of our staff back, which is great, but the activity level has increased dramatically, so people can come in, they can browse, they can use the computers. We had an appointment-based system with our doors locked, and you'd have to ring the doorbell. Now it feels more like the regular library, though, as I said, less hours, still less staff, but we're looking to have things back by the end of the calendar year, back to full speed.
Do the numbers, the foot traffic numbers, impact funding for you in any way?
Not directly. They enable us to tell the story about how many people come in, how many visitors we have. Certainly with our doors locked, it's different than if we're open. The number of people who drive into our parking lot on their way somewhere, they needed something printed out, they need something signed, they need something notarized. That stuff diminished during the last year, but it's picked up, like I said, dramatically in the last couple of weeks.
I was thinking when you were talking there that some of the people that are hurt most are people who depend on the library for computers.
Absolutely, yeah. We were able, one of the things we did to try to bridge the gap during the pandemic, the worst of it, we expanded our Wi-Fi access. We kept it on 23 hours, 59 minutes of the day. We put it at different spaces in the building. We pretty much had people using our Wi-Fi all the time, but the in-building use did decrease. Again, that's picked up. We developed a couple things where we tried to make it easier for if people needed something, we did more of the work for them, and then we're able to deliver it when they couldn't enter the building.
So you're saying that somebody could pull into the parking lot with their computer?
Yep.
And then use the Wi-Fi from the parking lot?
Cell phone, tablet, whatever they had, so long as, and there's no fee to use it, and basically they just sign into our Wi-Fi network and they could use it. So.
And that's the way it is now, too?
Yep, and we're going to keep it as accessible as we did during the pandemic, because we realize how many people still need the service, and it's not really a cost to us. It's just another way that we can, essentially serve the community in a way that we hadn't before. We thought, well, we have to limit it. We don't want people hanging out in the parking lot overnight. People aren't doing that. People are using it for what they need, and then they're going about their business.
Speaking of electronic kind of stuff, is it possible to get online and from wherever and download a book?
Yes, that's one of the things that the pandemic, the amount of e-content and downloadable audio and ebook and magazine use increased exponentially during the pandemic. We also had purchased before last March an online version of the Observer-Dispatch. The numbers in that skyrocketed, so people with a Utica library card can read that day's edition as though the actual paper edition of the newspaper were in their hands. But yeah, we've been tracking our e-use, so the downloadable audio and book downloadable print. We're really happy with the numbers. We've encouraged people to sign up, and the portability is a great feature. The problem with the e-content is that it's very expensive. So we work out a way, if there are a lot of holds or requests on items, libraries try to pitch in a little extra. Us, as one of the co-central libraries in the system, we tend to buy more copies of more materials so that more people have access.
Is the other co-central Jervis?
Yes, Jervis and Rome. We're both co-central. So we have different requirements from the state. That's another thing that COVID did. The state expects certain hours that we're open, certain number of computers and staffing. We've been in conversation with them. We're having issues being as open as they want us to be, but we've assured them that we have limitations and there's a reason for it. And a big part of it is just that we lost a significant sources of revenue during the past.
I'm curious, when you say that the state has requirements for computers, what do they require you to have?
Based on the service population, it's the exact number escapes me. But based on our population, we have to have a dedicated IT staff person, which we do, but not a lot of the smaller libraries in the system don't have a dedicated person on staff. They use the Mid-York Library System staff to do their IT work. For example, that's just one.
Do people come in, and I'm thinking of people new to this country, do people come into the library who don't know how to use a computer?
Yeah, absolutely. We got a phone call the other day actually from somebody who said, I've been cooped up for the last 18 months. I got a cell phone. She was calling us on a landline, obviously, because her question was, I have no idea how to use the cell phone. I bought it. Will you sit down with me and help me set it up? So those are the things we did before. Those are the things that we're going to be obviously doing more of. Certainly, people who have adopted or have been fortunate enough to adopt new technology because they realize how much you can do with it over the last year, we expect that they'll be coming in with additional needs that we can meet.
What about that? I'm looking at you, but I'm seeing Judge John J. Welch in my memory. And Judge Welch would be in there all the time, particularly after he retired from the bench. And he'd be on those microfilm readers.
Yep.
Because that's where he got all the stuff that he put into his books. Are those still available?
Yep, they are. That was something, we got a lot of requests. We always get a steady amount of requests. During the last 12 to 18 months, we got a lot. I feel like we got a lot more requests for lookups. I need this. I need to know the name of my ancestor. We had a really interesting story. I'll make it brief. One of the Oneida County History Center board members actually found a wedding ring in a parking lot, and in the inscription on it, she called us and said, hey, on a hunch, can you look up weddings on this date in Utica? Here's the initials. Without revealing who it was, our reference librarian was able to use the microfilm, looked on that date or close to it, found the initials, and we were able to contact the family and get the wedding ring back to them. That happened during the pandemic, so that's the kind of stuff, we do that all the time, but it came at a particularly nice moment during the shutdown where we missed the connection with people and people missed the connection with us, and it's great to feel like we're getting back to that.
That's a great story. People ask me if I miss writing a column for the OD. I don't, because I wrote it for 20 years, but when I hear stories like that, I miss it, because I'd like to write that one. Chris Sagaas is our guest. We're talking about the Utica Public Library. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Chris Sagaas is our guest. Chris is the director of the Utica Public Library, and if I've done my math correctly, he's been in that job for 4 years?
Yes, absolutely.
During that time, Chris, what do you think's, and I know it's not just you, it's you and his staff, but you're the one on top. What would you say is the biggest accomplishment that the Utica Public Library has seen in those 4 years?
Well, and thank you for acknowledging that it's not just me. It's nothing happens without the great staff that I'm fortunate to work along with. I know we've talked about this before. When I inherited the library leadership role 4 years ago, I basically ushered to completion the renovation of the children's room, which is still a wonderful $500,000 project. We've done about almost the same amount of projects over the last 3 years to continue to improve the physical space. But one of the things that we took advantage of during the shutdown period in the last year, we had 3 generous funders, an anonymous donor, the MTPT Partners Trust Fund, and the Mealy Family Fund, who gave us money to essentially inventory our whole collection, and basically change the whole way we manage the collection. We got new security gates. We've significantly reduced the amount of staff and public time it takes to check out your materials. And we now have essentially a complete inventory of about 45 to 50,000 of our circulating items that we had not had in the time that nobody can remember how long ago we did that. So that's probably, the staff was really, we said we need to focus on this so that when we reopen, the customers and our patrons who come in have a new experience, a streamlined, better experience, and also we know what we have and we can manage the collection much better. So that's probably it.
When I was a young man, you'd go into the Utica Public Library and you would open a drawer, and it was all Dewey Decimal System, right?
Yep.
And you'd flick through the card, you'd find the book you wanted, and everything was coded in the stacks.
Yep.
So you could go right there. Usually I would be lazy and I'd just go to a librarian and say, where is that?
Yeah.
But that exists no more?
Well, no, we still have, well, the card catalog does not exist, other than collector quality furniture that is in our building. But the Dewey Decimal System is still in use. It's still a fantastic way of organizing our collection, but now all the searching is done. People still ask librarians, which is great, or through our online catalog and the computer. So it's a lot easier to store the stuff. You don't have to make space for furniture, but it's definitely changed. It's changed the way that you and I look for our material. But I think it's for the better at this point, for sure.
Yeah. And if somebody were to ask you how many books, how many documents, how many maps, how many whatever are in the Utica Public Library collection, what would the answer be?
Well, because we just had an update, I think we have about 75 to 80,000 items. They are not all circulating. A portion of them are in our local history genealogy section, which does not circulate. We have additional copies of significant reference texts, for example. And then what we actually also have are one of the things we've done over the last year, since we've spent so much time paying attention to the interior, we've uncovered some cool collections that have never been cataloged, such as some really great USGS maps of New York State. So we would love to figure out a way. Those don't exist in every library anymore, so we found some really cool collections that we hope to actually catalog and promote to the public over the next year. I can't tell you all about them now, but that's one of the things we definitely think we could find some.
I'm curious, where would you find something like that?
Where would you find the maps?
Yeah, I mean, where did you find them?
So we've reoriented our interior use of the space. We had an old kind of storage closet on our in-between 3rd and 4th floor, and there are old catalogs and shelving units in there with pull-out drawers, and we found all these maps just because they were buried by our Christmas ornaments that we bring out once a year.
Speaking of things that in the collection, I was writing a column the other day about the Oriskany battlefield and General Herkimer, and there was a painting, a famous painting, and so famous I've forgotten the artist, but isn't the original at the Utica Public Library?
The original is at the library. The artist, I want to say Frederick Yohn, but I could be.
It's Y-O-H-N.
Y-O-H-N.
Yeah,
it's still
right.
there. It hangs right outside our gallery space, and it is the original. We actually own the rights to reproduction of it, but it's there.
Yeah, and the people will recognize that picture. It was used on a U.S. postage stamp, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And it's Herkimer after he was wounded, and he's resting against a tree, right?
Yep. And I think the wound in his leg and the painting is actually the opposite of where the wound was in his actual body. But
Okay.
it was also, I grew up and my Boy Scout council was the General Herkimer Council. So I had that patch on my
Yeah.
arm for 15 years.
Yeah,
10 years.
You mentioned genealogy collection that doesn't circulate. There's a room on the second floor that used to house the genealogy collection. Still there?
Still there. We actually, one of our community volunteers, who's a snowbird, she's coming back. I think she's going to start this week doing some volunteer work, helping people with their family tree searches. We don't have the capacity as a staff to essentially do family trees for people, but we will do as much as we can with what we have, and then usually we have a network of people we can refer that work to.
You mentioned volunteers. Are you getting any volunteers in there?
Yep, some people have started to call us back. We had a cafe space that unfortunately we closed and won't be reopening, partly because we needed to store some stuff in there, also because it's a tiny space and we needed to cut some of our expenses. So that was one of them, but we're looking to figure out additional ways we can have volunteers help the library that we haven't made use of before. So people are calling; they want to get volunteer opportunities. So we hope to be able to give more of that to the community.
So what do they do? Just give you a buzz, Chris?
Yep,
or?
they could just call the library and say they're interested in volunteering. They'll get connected with our administrative assistant. You know, sometimes we have projects. We have some projects this summer. We actually could have some help in, and we're looking to possibly see if people from the community want to do more of maybe outreach events with us. We just started this past weekend at the Farmers Market. We're probably going to be at the Levitt Amp Monday night Utica Monday night concert series. So we're doing more of that stuff, which is a great way for us to just to be seen and to see other people. So.
Okay. Talking about being seen, we have to see some commercials, but we'll do that, and then we'll be right back with Chris Sagaas. Short break, right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Chris Sagaas is our guest, Director of Utica Public Library. He's been on the job for 4 years. What, Chris, have you been doing with social media?
Well, we actually, just a month or so ago, promoted one of our children's room staffers into our digital services and outreach position. We had a youth services and adult Facebook page. We combined those. We've amped up our Instagram. Our head of our children's department actually collaborated with the assistant director of Hamilton Public Library. They've produced a TV series where they go to local businesses and people in the creative community. I think that launches this week. You can go to our website. We'll be putting it on the library's YouTube channel. So we've got a TikTok presence now, which, you know, if it's out there and it's in the ether and people are talking about it, we've tried to dip into it. One of the fun things we did, the Children's Museum, when they had to kind of deaccession their stuff before they're moving everything, they reached out to us and said, you know, there's some stuff here, would you like it? You know, and our staff went over and we got their big collection of dinosaur kind of figurines. So my children's staff developed they were going to be these stories we told about the dinosaurs in the library, and then they learned how to do stop motion animation, and they've created all these videos of the dinosaurs that look like they're checking out books and, you know, mowing the lawn and other types of funny stuff.
Yeah.
So we're trying to maintain, and I think we're in the social media realm in all of the platforms that are used and people engage with.
It's libraries have to be creative these days, do they not?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things, I mean, just trying to figure out a way to give people services that they wanted when we couldn't let them in the building, doing our outdoor pop-up checkouts and the like. We're going to take some of those things and we're still going to do outdoor programming. I mean, the reality is we still have to have more people vaccinated. There are people with immune issues that are still going to be worried. There are kids who have not been vaccinated. We don't want to shut anybody out of their own personal situation where they may not want to come into the building. But we are allowing kids back in. We're going to have story times. We're doing all these things, but the during the pandemic, we said, how do we still provide services in a way that people know we're here and we meet their needs while they can't come into the building freely?
The children's library is in what used to be, for many years, the reference part of the building.
Yeah.
And people could go in there and look at magazines and newspapers. Can you do that anywhere anymore?
Well, that's one of the other unfortunate budget cuts was we ceased magazine and newspaper purchases for this year. And we have ways that we can still get the information for people, which it's, the answer is no, not right now. We aren't worried necessarily about the transmission of the virus through contact with surfaces, but the browsing aspect of, or I should say the lounging aspect of sitting around in a space with other people for a long amount of time, that's still a risk factor, so we're trying to mitigate that. So we said we'll just go without it for this year and hopefully we'll bring it back next year.
You're talking about limited budgets, and that's certainly understandable, but if you had the money, Chris, in the back of your mind, do you have something, boy, if we had the money, I'd love to do this at the Utica Public Library?
Well, first and foremost, in the short term, if we had the funds we'd lost over the last year, I'd bring all my staff back and we'd be open 58 and a half hours a week. That's the thing that animates me and keeps me up at night. Aside from that, what we really would like to have at the library is a kind of a revised, updated entrance. 70% of our traffic comes from the Park Avenue parking lot side of our building, but the entrance has some issues as far as the aesthetics. You walk in and you don't see a person, you see a wall, although there's a really nice sign above it that some of my trustees paid for. But part of that is that we have an elevator that we can get people onto, and it's accessible with staff or other person intervention. It's not truly accessible. We would love to say that Utica Public Library is totally accessible. You could roll in a wheelchair and access the elevator on your own and get to all of the floors that we do have. We're not there yet. That's about a $1.5 million project with a revamped entryway into the building, possibly on the Park Avenue side. It would be more than that, but we would love to be able to say people can come in here with no barriers, no obstacles, and do everything on their own.
Boy, it's been, over the years, though, those barriers have been reduced. I remember when you could go downstairs out of the Park Ave and you'd go down those steep steps into those doors down there.
Yeah, it's funny. That's now only our emergency exit, but it's funny, because I can see people out my back window. People will park, and it still looks like an entrance and a tunnel over on the side. You think, well, what is that over there? So we've imagined some type of restructured entryway into the back of the building that's on the ground level. The issue with the library, because we're on the state and National Register of Historic Places, is that we'd have to get permission.
Yeah.
And the structure's so great, we don't want to alter it. But we think that we're not content to have the barrier to access that the outdated, although fully functional, elevator provides.
What is in what used to be the Children's Museum, which was down in the basement? What's in there now?
So the children's staff took over some of the space to store all their crafts, to do all their creative stuff, but it's also a great space for us to do dedicated story times with kids and messy crafts so they don't mar the brand new, children's room that we renovated upstairs.
Yeah.
So it gets a lot of use. It's an additional alternative programming space that parents appreciate.
One of the things that is kind of not used, I don't believe. I used it once for a meeting and I enjoyed it. There's that little room downstairs in the basement between the two staircases.
Yep. Funny you should mention that. A local journalist, I'm sure you know Richard Barrett. So he has developed a really cool podcast, and he's been using our podcasting equipment and studio, and he has a traveling one. And with a building like ours, there's a variety of audio ambient issues that can develop depending what room you're in. That's the room that he has chosen to be the best to record his stuff because it's kind of an enclosed space. So.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be an interesting year for the Utica Public Library. I hope it's a successful year. Come back soon.
Thank you.
Okay. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. Don't forget, CNY homepage.com has got a lot of good stuff there. Until next time, take care of yourself, everybody.